For today, my plan is to get a little bit more clarification of what exactly Gray did in this last fight. Because I feel like if you don't know too much about the way that Maker Magic works, it sounds a little far-fetched, but really it comes down to a lot of just knowledge and technique. And there's an interesting fact about like how Gray's magic is, and again, it's similar to how Natsu's magic is. Maker magic isn't the same as Slayer magic, relatively in any foundational or general applications of how the powers work. It's more so that it has such a level of complication in what it can do, not that what it does directly. Because I mean, one of the things is we haven't seen a lot of Maker wizards in large scale. We have like some random ones, you have like lackeys having wood make magic, and you got people from like the random filler stuff that'll have like a Maker magic. It's a very easy magic just to give to somebody. I know there's like that random guy that Natsu fought in the mountains that actually I think it was the woman, I can't remember exactly, I think she had iron make magic or something like that. But and one of my favorites, I mean Rufus, I mean memory make is just really cool. But I mean, we've seen a good amount of just ice make itself. Gray, obviously, Leon, Old Tier. But we haven't seen really any Maker Magics or Maker Mages, rather, in large scale besides Gray. Because Invul wasn't a Maker Wizard. We didn't have any of the Arasion 6. Well, at 2, or any of the members of the Seven Kin. None of the, well, technically, counting, but not counting Old Tier because she kind of had it in a completely different scenario than what we're talking about. But or the 9 Demon Gates. There weren't. Well, it's Ice Devil slaying. I gotta check myself before someone technically gets me in the comments. But as it were, it's not like we had, say like Invul, where Invul was just using cold and freezing. But he wasn't a Maker Wizard. Hakune wasn't a Maker Wizard. We kind of almost had that similarly with Viernes, because he just, as kind of like how Gray fights, he just has this super freeform way of doing what he does with gold. But as it were, I brought some panels and stuff just to kind of like talk a little bit about it today. Let me get rid of the Gray one real fast. We'll come back to it. But when you remember like talking about it, excuse me, sir, can you sit down? Excuse me. When she was like first just talking about the Maker Magic in general, first obviously her training of being like, to use ice you have to be one with the ice. It's about being part of and melding into what your element is, that way you can understand it better. But also that out of their type of magic, it is a magic of freedom and creativity. I'll have to pull up that one with Gray really fast as I'm talking, where he was fighting Doriath, and he mentions that even though he was turned into a kid, his imagination and stuff was all pretty much just at full capacity, and he was able to do different styles of thinking on the fly. And I think small stuff like that for Gray ultimately like collects into his utilization of his type of magic, to where he is able to do stuff again with Maker Magic that most people wouldn't. And I think part of that is because it's something that unless you are both a level, again, creative and smart, like you just do quick on your feet like Gray, because Gray isn't like Natsu where he's as directly battle smarts in the same way. Like obviously Natsu has his own things, but Gray directly assesses like where he goes around a problem, more so with tools, where Natsu thinks of a way to kind of how can I get through this, where Gray would want to get around it or figure out a way to, like if you had like a wall, Natsu would just want to go through the wall. Gray might try and go over it, he might go around it, he might go under it, maybe he figures out a way to disassemble the pieces, so it's like, you just take each brick off immediately, makes a bunch of ice hands that just pull it apart. It's just a different way that they are going to go into like how do I solve this problem that I have. And with Gray, as we saw in the fight and leading up to it, of just like how he was, it was more so an expansion of his understanding of different types of magic. Like we know when he was turned into Juvia, he got to experience water make magic, and part of that that's important and then is because at that point when he was using water, which is close to ice, it's like directly adjacent, he wasn't able to do it as easily as he would obviously using his own type of magic, because it is again similar but not the same type that he is used to. So once he was turned into Natsu, he was able to catch on to using fire magic much faster seemingly than he did when he was turned into Juvia, because it obviously fire is much more difficult as an opposing element than what you're used to. But he already had, like, I know mentally how I need to get around this. Like if you didn't turn into Juvia, it probably would have been much harder for him to do anything with, trying to conjure up and grasp fire magic the same way that he did, because again, the way that was problematic for him was he was trying to, he was like, I need to not think about using ice magic. I need to think about the fact I'm using water magic. Because of that, that really put Gray in the mindset of, I need to think of other people's magic, what I know of, and how do I apply that to what I have now. So, and part of the reason that I think that is really important is when you pull up the general, let me get the panels for the recent chapter. Actually, let me move this one real fast. But with Gray, you see it in when he's using this power. And granted, too, there's like a partial form to it, because like his other half, like his left side, is frozen, but it's like symmetrical to the black part of his devil slaying, so it has to be like this part, this is his devil slaying coming. I'm doing the wrong side, but you know what I mean, like his right side, I guess I'm mirrored it. His right side is covered in his devil slaying, and his left side seems to be covered in just raw ice. Now, the reason I think that's really important, especially just in terms of naming, you go back to like Gray's chapter for 239, the Freezing Warrior. I think this really ends up, again, cultivating a lot of Gray's kind of character and what he represents in the verse, but also this idea that, again, unlike fire, though, again, fire can do, it's not like fire has a set shape, but ice is a solid, but is a solid that you are able to give, again, shape to however you like. But not only give it shape, as we've seen, apply aspects that he knows into what he's capable of doing. So, like, again, with, like, Natsu, he was able to understand fire magic at a general fundamental level. He's fought against people using fire magic. He's fought variants as well, like, he fought Fukuro, who had eaten Natsu and then been using an imitation of his power. He fought Rufus, who is using, like, fire and lava and stuff. So it's not like Gray, doesn't have combat experience in opposition to it, because obviously, he also fought Natsu a lot when they were kids, so it's a completely different, a different scenario of seriousness, but it's something that, he can understand the fundamentals of what it is that he's going for, while also getting a degree of experience when he was turned into Natsu. And Natsu has had a lot in this, like, whole run for 100 Years quest about specifically upping the temperature of his fire, and not just focusing on fire AoE, but focusing a lot on just increasing temperature higher and higher, burning internally, as we saw, like, Mad Mole and Alderon. But with Gray, the similar of going for the cold, going for colder and colder. And I wasn't going to use this panel specifically originally, but I think it's important because, like, when you see it, he's not forming ice on him. He's not doing anything directly that you would expect with ice. It is just the cold. And Carlos talking about, a black blizzard. He's just got this torrent of black speckled cold air around him swirling. And when Wendy says, he combined it with Devil Slaying, again, I mentioned in my chapter review, the way that Wendy interpreted it is kind of like Goku using Super Saiyan Blue and Kaioken, where they are two separate things that just combined, he is able to kind of have a pseudo way of buffing and improving the Super Saiyan Blue form, but they don't come together to make something new. Now, Gray didn't just say, okay, well, I'm using Ice Make to freeze the air, and then I'm going to use Devil Slaying too, or use them at the same time. Gray says that he made Devil Slaying magic. And again, the reason that's important is because for Gray, now he is able to push his magic, not just ice, but like the affinity of the cold, in ways that aren't, it's not just, Ice Make, do a shape. He is thinking about, like, how can I take what I have and expand upon it? So he's been applying, just the ideas of the cold and, freezing air to his devil slaying. And when he's saying he made a devil slay magic, I wish we got like a definitive name for it. I'm gonna probably go with just like freezing devil slayer instead, for at least for right now, because I think it makes sense. It calls back to the chapter, the name, as well as like using cold air. It's not like he's using snow. It looks a little bit like it, but I mean, I would imagine that's just kind of the speckles in the wind, especially with the glittering ice name. It's probably more of a, you see the effect of it, kind of like Senbone Sakura, when it's like the light reflects off of the little scrap blades, so they look like sakura petals. But with this, it's important again to understand like how Gray goes step by step. And I mentioned before like an idea of something he hasn't done, but what he could theoretically do. Because it doesn't seem like directly that he is going to be like, I have to try this magic out, then do it. I think that is just a way for him to kind of get kickstarted into going. Because, I mean, it's different if you don't know something entirely and you don't even really think of the method, to where it's like he tried out these other magics. He was put in a spot where he had to give them a go. And because of that, Gray is like, okay, well, I'm able to pretty much invent new ways of that my magic works. And I think that's really important, because like that's not something that, say, like Wendy or Urza or anyone could do. I mean, Urza could get a new sword and then enchant something in it. Hers is a different story. But Gray essentially could, as I mentioned, like thinking about Laxus, like thinking about lightning magic, he could think of these same concepts, but instead of a bolt of energy, it's a bolt of cold, and he just throws what looks just like a javelin of cold air, just throws his own Lanza, and it wouldn't even like hit and then freeze ice. It would just be like almost this just puff, like just of cold air that just instantly freezes everything in it. And when we see this, there is seemingly, and I don't think that Gray is going to be able just to create any magic. I think Gray is going to stick with ice and cold and freezing things. But it is the way that he could see any other type of magic and then integrate that into what he can do. Like if he saw, maybe he thought about like, okay, well, what about Makarov's magic? And then maybe he does kind of like how he had the ice make Vambrace, but he does it so it's like as he's swinging, the ice is so cold that it's freezing the air and the moisture like mid travel. So anytime it moves, the cold air is collecting all that and then freezing and making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Or maybe something with like Rogue, where he makes like, he thinks of like a shadow and he does something with ice that makes like an overcast, and anything in the shadow, because it's so cold, kind of like think of the dark side of the moon, where it's so cold the second that shadow touches, it freezes anything within its cover. I'm very excited to see where he's going to go with this and where exactly he's going to further progress this. I mean, I know a lot of people, including myself, we were expecting a continuation of his devil slaying form. I think this is actually better indirectly, because it not only gives Gray like a foundational buff, it's kind of like when he got devil slaying in the first place, because it is a direct, just all around improvement and bonus to what he had beforehand. Before he had ice make, now he not only has ice make, but he has a way to adapt and learn other people's ice abilities, as well as he can eat, consume, and regain magic and stamina from other ice attacks. So he went from a guy who is, types of offensive, defensive support, whatever he needs to, ice abilities, to having a way of direct combat as well as countering other ice people. And now he has an ability, maybe not directly an ability, but like an understanding, and at a point where he's expanded what he can do with his powers and how he creatively goes about, just utilizing what magic he has and what he, knowledge he's already acquired. It gives him the ability to, again, just anytime Gray gets in a scenario where he, has learned or seen something or figured something out, he could expand that onto his ice make. Like, again, like think of the idea if he thought of like Ultir's time abilities, and he said, okay, well, what if I did something that applied like a time thing where I could freeze somebody, and it's like the idea of they're frozen in time, so where it doesn't actually freeze time, but it'd be like a selective one just for them. Kind of like just an instant freeze on somebody, and you see in like a movie or something, and they stay frozen, preserved in ice, and they're thawed out and they're just fine. Something like that, where it wouldn't do direct damage. It would be like an ice ability that just does something on top of ice, like a time-based power. you know, anything along these lines that just Gray at some point can think of and be like, huh, that's a good point. Like maybe he'll think of something kind of like with Jet. Like obviously, like Jet is somebody that he's known for a long time. He'll apply it to like, okay, some speed. What can I do with speed in the cold? And he thinks about like Racer and Racer making stuff slower. And he's like, oh, wait a second. If things get slower if they're in a colder environment, like people just their bodies, like as they get colder and colder, it's harder for them to move around, and they need their body heat and their to keep active. And this colder and colder you get, it's going to be harder for them to keep up. He maybe thinks of something like that, and he applies that to his powers, where he does maybe like an AoE freeze, but he's not trying to freeze somebody over. It's just to do somebody such a large scale, like immediate cold drop, that it's like a shock on their body, and it creates almost like an internal problem for them outside of just I freeze a thing and I throw it at you. And you think of like this too is when he was using this ability on Viernes, it seemed not like that he was like like, because I say it looks kind of like snow. I think it's just visually so you can see it, but it doesn't look like it's falling on him. It just looks like this is just around him now. This is just in the air, and it starts forming on him. So with stuff like that, I wonder what is the next thing that he's going to really think of and expand upon? Is he going to make another type of devil slaying magic? I don't think so. I would imagine that with this new one, he's going to expand upon it before he does anything else, unless he evolves it one more time and does like I'm a permafrost devil slayer. I was like, dragon slayer. I mean, I guess technically, if he understood dragon slaying magic enough, he could probably create like a pseudo imitation of dragon slaying magic. Who knows? But I mean, I don't think it's like to like some crazy infinite expanse of what he can do. But it kind of it is, well, isn't, because I don't think that if like Gray's, like I said, with like lightning magic, Gray doesn't just learn lightning magic. He learns a way to apply what he has seen and knows, and like the properties of lightning to ice, or something like maybe someone, I'm trying to think of a specific person in the guild, or like a specific character. I guess with Lackey it'd be just how does she do her crazy wood make things? How can I apply that to to ice make? Well, maybe he makes some form of really cool giant ice tree that like the roots expand, and as the roots expand, they freeze everything within the vicinity, and it just keeps going and going. The tree, the further the tree goes and the further the tree freezes, the bigger it becomes and the more the effect hits, or something like that. There's a lot of general areas that he could climb from this, and it's not something limited in the way that, say, Natsu using different fire abilities in different ways, that he takes like fire on his body in some way and attacks somebody with it, does some form of different combo martial arts style, or like Urza getting a sword, put somebody else's magic into it because she has to get his weapon enchanted with a power. And as well as with that, you would probably have to be, I assume, you would have to be with the person, and they would have to apply their abilities to it, because it's not like Urza just learned Devil Ice and Dragon Fire. I mean, it's very clear that like it'd be a prep based thing, whereas Gray doesn't need that. And you can think of something too, with like Lucy when she was using her Gemini Aquarius Star Dress, that she was going through her memories in order to think of something of how going through different events and different characters in different times that she's been with other people in turmoil and battles. How can she use what she knows against against Kiri, and how she was able to win? With like Gray though, Gray doesn't need technically even to have the experience, because if you think about it, like even like if Gray was chilling and like watched the last Grand Magic games or something, or maybe he was just walking down the street and he saw some guy do a magic or a thing that like kind of resonated with him, he'd be able to apply that to his magic and evolve a new style. And that's why, like with this, Gray making, and not even like making, like actually making a new type of magic, he essentially evolved the ice devil slaying that he got from his father into this freezing devil slayer that he himself invented, which is really cool, because we haven't seen much for like outright invented, like fully created types of magic in the verse. Like clearly we've seen spells, but not like a brand new Slayer type. Not like Slayer type, like, oh, this is a brand new, fourth Slayer kind, but a new type of Devil Slayer. And it's not like we've seen a ton of Devil Slayers. I mean, now we have ice and cold, I guess, or freezing. But it still means that now he is at a point where maybe he could make a further version. Or the fact that Gray is capable now of using a magic that only he has. Because if you think about it, this is one of the things I'll close out on. If you think about it with dragon slaying magic, you are primarily, I mean, you're getting it specifically a lot of the time from a specific dragon. Even with the second and third gen, the Lacrimas are going to be from a specific dragon. You just probably would have never known them. But with devil slaying, we don't really know too much about devil slaying and origins. But there is like the idea that, I've gone with the idea, it's like, okay, well, maybe there is a demon that existed that was like a reason for each of these. Like, instead of a whole species like with dragons, there was one specific, like, big, scary ice devil. There was one specific, I guess with D&Ds for fire, one specific, like, a lightning devil, one specific of, like, a tree devil. Where it's like you don't have, a whole bunch of them. It's just, like, one extreme one of each type. Whereas, like, there's that idea of it, but with Gray invented his own. So as far as we know, Gray could be the first demon to ever like really have this level of ability and power once I still think at some point he's going to expand his devil slaying form into something far more progressed, especially with like the way that we see in this chapter with like the ice on the other side of his body. They'll probably meet a lot closer, and I think it'd be really cool if he had like a half and half form, like he had one black horn and one pure like white and blue ice horn, especially with the black ice now that he has. But as it were, I'd love to hear what people in the comments have to think about like the fact that Gray can do this. I think that makes complete sense, just because again it's not like Gray didn't just be like, okay, well I'm just gonna decide now that I'm a master alchemist, or he just invented something that isn't in line with what he could already do. Because when you think about it, it would be like if Natsu went from a fire dragon slayer to just raw heat, and he just, he didn't even have to bring fire out. He could just exude, extreme temperatures without having to really do too much extra. And obviously these are different styles, but it is in a way that like if Gray figured, like, because this is the last thing I'll say actually, was with the True Ice Kamui that Invil had, if Gray remembers enough about it and is able to apply that not only to his ice make but his devil slaying, imagine if he became a true ice devil slayer, as the full ability of just all of your ice attacks and cold attacks are going to just say, yeah, fuck your resistances, fuck your abilities, unless you are somehow also a slayer that is relevantly close and can somehow adapt and do these things in the short moments before I freeze and destroy you. Gray could become an ice devil of the most pure style of cold and ice magic, to where most characters wouldn't even be able to handle just general attacks from him. He would automatically, I would assume, other than like the dragon gods, he would be one of the most powerful people known in the burst. Because I mean, like, just him beating Viernes puts him really high. But human Viernes before people get mad. But still. Anyway, I rambled a few more minutes than I planned. I was trying to go for like 15 to 18 minutes, and this is like 20. But I mean, I wanted to talk a little bit about it. I know like I said, I rambled a little bit, but I mean, this is something that I know that some people, like, again, were hoping for a new form. Kind of did with the whole, like, white on one side, black on the other. But it is in a way that if you don't know how Gray got to this point, it would just feel weird that he's just like, yeah, I can just make powers now on the fly. But you have to understand, one, his magic, like how Maker magic works fundamentally. See the steps in Gray getting these new advancements in like different technique areas of his powers and like the fundamentals of Slayer, Slayer magic for one, but also Maker magic, and then understanding like differences in the styles of magic, like what we saw with Juvia and like when he adapted to being Natsu. It just gives him an edge that nobody else on the team has, and I like that a lot. Because it's like with Wendy's enchanting, it's a simple power that has nearly unlimited applications, and Gray has a set power with near infinite variables and variants, because like in theory, Gray can make a new type of ice or cold spell from anything that he sees or thinks of or understands. So we'll see how this all progresses. Like I said, I don't expect him to get another like big fight for a little bit. I still hope that he fights Lekka and then like Gate, like at least one of the two of those, please. I mean, I would assume Lekka. Gate I think would be so cool. I mean, like obviously he's gonna have an advantage against doubles, but I mean Gate gives off like a built different vibe. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. I got some more content for Fairy Tail as well as other reviews on my channel coming out over these next couple days, and then I'm going to do what I can to stay as caught up as possible. I've had a lot of just going over my content and my videos and stuff over the last like half week, so I can get in the steady consistency that I require. I know I did for January, and then I slowed down a bit, but my plan, I got a little sidetracked, and just as like a partial thing, just the easiest summary of the two parts. I had a bad ear, not bad. I had an annoying ear infection, and then I got addicted to Digimon Cyber Sleuth. So it's a combination of both like physical issue and a game that I didn't think I was gonna love that I think is peak. But anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next one.